All right, so we're diving right into the Aser 2024 report.
Yeah.
And for anyone who's not familiar, this is basically our annual checkup on education in rural India.
It's been running for almost 20 years.
And what's so cool about Aser is that it's not just looking at how many kids are sitting in classrooms.
Right.
It's really digging into whether they're actually learning.
Exactly. Measuring that impact.
Okay, so let's jump right in. Enrollment first.
Okay.
One thing that surprised me was that bump we saw in government school enrollment during the pandemic. Gone.
Yeah.
Completely disappeared. Back to pre-pandemic levels.
It's interesting, right? I think it was a temporary shift.
Yeah.
A lot of families, they just didn't have other options.
Right.
Private schools shut down, went online.
Yeah.
Not really feasible for a lot of rural families.
So government schools became the default, not necessarily the first choice.
Right, exactly. Once things stabilized, they went back to their previous preferences.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But there is one area where we're seeing a real upward trend preschool.
Oh, yeah, that's exciting.
Those little ones, ages 3 to 5, more and more of them are enrolled, which has got to be a good sign.
Definitely. It shows a growing awareness of the importance of early childhood education, for sure.
And you know what I found really interesting? The role of Anganwadis,
Huge EE role.
especially for those 3-year-olds.
Yeah, they're providing that early childhood education, but also health and nutrition services.
It's like a one-stop shop
Exactly.
for that crucial early development.
It really is.
Okay, so more kids are in school, at least. But what about the actual learning? That's the heart of the Aser report, right?
Yeah, that's what we really care about.
They're going beyond just attendance and testing those basic reading and math skills.
And here's the good news. Full recovery from the pandemic learning loss.
Wow, really?
In some cases, even higher scores than before.
So it wasn't just a dip and then back to normal? Some places actually surpassed where they were.
Exactly.
That's incredible.
I think a lot of that has to do with the government's push for those foundational literacy and numeracy programs.
All right, the FLN programs.
It's been a nationwide effort.
And the report shows that most schools are implementing them.
Yeah, they are.
So it's not just talk. There's action on the ground.
Right, putting those policies into practice.
But hold on, didn't the report also say there's still a huge gap between different states?
Oh, absolutely. Some are doing amazing, others are lagging behind.
So it's not a uniform success story.
It highlights that need for a nuanced approach, right? It's not just about having the program, it's how it's implemented.
Yeah.
Resources matter.
Teacher training, all of that.
Exactly.
There was that case study about Uttar Pradesh. They've made huge gains, right?
They have, especially in government schools. They really focused on teacher training, adapting those FLN guidelines to their specific needs. It's a great example of targeted interventions working.
Okay, so there's hope, even for those states that have been struggling.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's move on to something completely new in this Aser report, digital literacy.
Yeah.
They're looking at 14 to 16-year-olds and how they're navigating this digital world.
It's fascinating, right? Recognizing those digital skills are increasingly important.
And I'm guessing the first thing that jumps out is smartphone ownership.
Oh, yeah.
It's exploded in rural India.
Absolutely. They're everywhere.
So are these kids actually using those phones to learn and develop those digital skills?
Well, the report says that over 75% of them could do basic digital tasks on a smartphone.
Wow, really?
Yeah, like navigating menus, sending messages, even searching for information.
That's pretty impressive. I guess with the government's Digital India initiative and those PMGD-DIA programs, it's making an impact.
Right, exactly. Equipping those rural citizens with digital skills.
But I'm sure it's not all sunshine and roses. What about the challenges?
Well, one thing the report pointed out was the gender gap.
Oh, of course.
Boys tend to have higher digital skills than girls.
So it's not just about access to technology. It's about making sure everyone benefits equally.
Exactly.
We don't want to create new divides in this digital age.
No, absolutely not.
Yeah. Okay, before we go further down that road, let's talk about what Aser found when they actually went into the schools.
Okay.
I know they visit at least one government school in each village.
Yeah.
What were the big takeaways there?
Well, they confirmed that most schools are implementing those FLN programs.
Okay.
But the quality and support varies a lot.
Ah, I see.
Oh.
Not surprising, I guess.
Some teachers were even saying they weren't sure how to adapt those national FLN guidelines to their specific needs.
So it's not as simple as just handing them a manual and saying, go.
Exactly. They need more flexibility, more training.
More support to really make those programs effective.
Right.
And what about teacher training for those pre-primary classes?
Yes.
Especially with Anganwadis playing such a big role.
That's another area where the report highlighted both progress and challenges.
So, more recognition that those early years are crucial,
Yeah,
but maybe not enough qualified teachers to meet the demand.
it's a bit of a balancing act right now.
Trying to catch up with that surge in preschool enrollment, while also making sure those little ones are getting quality instruction.
Exactly. It's a work in progress.
Okay, so we've talked about Aser's focus on foundational skills reading and math. But how does that compare to other assessments, like Barak and C's?
Good question. They're measuring different things.
Okay, ask
At
that.
Caesar is really laser focused on those foundational skills, that baseline, our kids mastering the building blocks.
Right.
Other assessments might be looking at grade level competencies.
Which are important too.
Absolutely.
But it's like checking the foundation of a house before you worry about the paint color.
Exactly. You need that strong base.
And the other thing that sets Aser apart, it's citizen-led,
Yeah, it's unique that way.
not a top-down government thing.
It's a collaborative effort,
Involving volunteers from all over India.
giving them that incredible reach, getting data down to the district level.
That's amazing. And for our listener, I think it's important to remember that this data isn't just numbers on a page.
No, it's not.
Each data point is a child,
A future.
a possibility.
Exactly.
Okay, we've gotten a good overview of the big picture enrollment, learning levels, even a glimpse into digital literacy. Now, I want to zoom in on some specific details.
Okay, let's do it.
Starting with this preschool enrollment boom. We mentioned it's on the rise for ages 3 to 5.
Right.
But the report breaks it down even further, and there's a really interesting shift happening depending on the age.
Oh, yeah.
So for those 3-year-olds, Anganwadis are the dominant setting. But by the time they're 5, you see a higher percentage in government and private pre-primary classes.
It's like a changing landscape depending on where they are in that preschool journey.
Exactly. And the report really zeroes in on that year before a child enters class 1, age 5.
It's a big transition.
Huge. What are they seeing happening there?
Well, one positive trend is that fewer kids are being sent to primary school too early.
Oh, good.
Like, there's a recognition that pushing them into formal schooling before they're ready can backfire.
It's like trying to build a house on a shaky foundation.
Exactly. You need that solid base of pre-primary skills.
Social, emotional readiness, all of that.
It's crucial.
Okay, let's shift gears and talk about those school visits.
Okay.
I'm curious about what they observed, especially when it comes to those FLN programs.
One of the big things was the variability in how those programs are actually playing out.
So it's not a uniform implementation across the board.
Not at all. Most schools said they'd received directives, some training, but the quality was all over the place.
So it's not as simple as just handing teachers a manual and expecting them to run with it.
Definitely not. Some teachers were even saying they weren't sure how to align those guidelines with their students' specific needs.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
What about resources? Did teachers feel adequately equipped to implement these programs?
That's another area where the report highlighted some gaps. Access to materials, support from mentors, it varied quite a bit, and that impacted how effective those programs were.
It's like giving someone a blueprint, but no lumber or tools.
Exactly.
Okay, so it sounds like more flexibility, more training, more support are key for those FLN programs to truly thrive.
Absolutely. It's not a one-size-fits-all situation.
And that brings us back to that crucial point about teacher training and support.
Right. That's ongoing.
Not just a one-time thing.
Exactly.
We need to empower teachers to make those programs work for their students.
Couldn't agree more.
Okay, we've covered a lot in this first part of our deep dive. Enrollment trends, learning levels, even a glimpse into digital literacy. And we've started to unpack those school visits and the implementation of those FLN programs.
It's a lot to digest.
It is, but we're just getting started. Stay tuned for part 2, where we'll dig even deeper into those classroom observations and explore those strategies for strengthening FLN programs.
It's going to be fascinating. I can't wait.
Me neither. See you there.
See you there. So, welcome back to our deep dive into the Aser 2024 report.
Yeah, last time we were talking about those impressive gains in learning levels after the pandemic hit.
Right, the system bounced back, stronger in some cases.
Which is incredible to see.
Yeah.
But we also talked about how a lot of that progress was tied to those FLN programs.
The government's big push for foundational literacy and numeracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we saw how important implementation is, making sure teachers have the support they need.
It's not just about having a program on paper.
Right. It's got to work in the real world.
So for this part of our deep dive, I thought we could dig into some specific strategies for strengthening those FLN programs.
Okay, I like that. Moving from analysis to action.
What are the ingredients for success? What can we learn from the places that are doing it well?
Yeah, because I'm sure our listeners thinking, okay, foundational skills are important, but how do we actually make sure every child is mastering them?
Right. How do we translate that into real impact?
Exactly. So where do we start?
Well, first, let's remember that foundational skills aren't just about the mechanics of reading and math. It's bigger than that.
Okay, yeah. It's not just about decoding words or memorizing times tables.
Right. It's about building that love of learning, fostering critical thinking, problem solving.
The skills you need for life, not just for a test.
Exactly. So when we're thinking about strengthening these programs, we got to keep that bigger picture in mind.
So engagement is key.
Definitely.
But what are some concrete strategies for making FLN programs more engaging, more effective?
Well, the report highlighted this making learning relevant to kids' lives.
Oh, yeah. Not just some abstract concept in a textbook.
Right. Use local examples, storytelling.
Connect those math concepts to everyday stuff.
Exactly. Like, hey, math isn't just in your textbook. It's how we build houses, cook food, even play games.
And when kids see those connections, suddenly it's not just boring schoolwork.
It clicks.
It's part of their world.
Right.
Another thing the report talked about was active learning.
Yeah, getting those kids moving, thinking, interacting.
Turn those classrooms into buzzing hives of activity.
Exactly. And those active learning approaches, they're so effective for these foundational skills.
Okay, give me an example.
Think about kids building towers with blocks.
Okay, yeah, they're having fun.
But they're also learning about shapes, spatial reasoning, even early engineering concepts.
Sneaking in those educational nuggets.
Right.
But not all teachers are comfortable with those more active learning techniques.
That's true. Some are more used to that traditional lecture style.
So how do we bridge that gap?
Teacher training.
Of course.
Give them the skills, the confidence to facilitate those active learning experiences.
Right, not just saying, okay, go teach math with Legos.
Exactly.
They need guidance
Resource.
and the space to experiment.
Exactly.
Find what works for them and their students.
Which brings us to another key strategy, ongoing professional development.
It can't just be a one-time training on a new curriculum.
Definitely not. They need continued support, mentorship.
Opportunities to collaborate with other teachers, share what's working.
Exactly. Like, okay, here's the basic training, but now let's create that community of support where you can keep learning and growing.
And those professional development opportunities should be tailored to the teacher's needs.
Right? Absolutely. Some might need more support with classroom management. Others might need help with specific teaching techniques.
Or how to use technology effectively.
Yeah, exactly. It's about personalized learning, even for teachers.
Recognizing that they have their own strengths, areas for growth, just like their students.
Great.
Okay, so we've talked about making learning relevant, incorporating active learning, providing that ongoing teacher support.
Yeah.
What other strategies did the report suggest?
One that's really important is making sure those programs are culturally responsive.
Ah, yes. Recognizing that India is incredibly diverse.
So many languages, cultures, traditions.
We can't just assume a one-size-fits-all approach is going to work.
Exactly. We need to think about how those programs are being adapted to different contexts.
Are they using local languages?
Are they using examples and stories that resonate with those kids' lives?
Are they respecting those diverse backgrounds?
All of that. It's recognizing that learning is a social and cultural process.
Right. It's not just about transmitting information.
It's about connecting with those hearts and minds.
In a way that makes sense to them.
Exactly. And when we create those culturally responsive environments, we're teaching more than just reading and math.
Okay, what else are we teaching?
Respect.
Empathy.
Appreciation for diversity.
Using education to build bridges,
Yeah, exactly.
not reinforce divisions.
And that brings us to another important strategy involving parents and communities.
Oh, I love that. Bringing everyone into the fold.
It's a shared responsibility.
Right. Education isn't just something that happens in the classroom.
Exactly.
But let's be realistic, not all parents have the time or resources to be super involved.
You're right. They might be working multiple jobs, might not have a high level of education themselves.
Language barriers, all sorts of things.
So we need to create multiple pathways for engagement.
Okay, what does that look like?
It's not just about expecting them to come to school for conferences.
Right.
It's about finding creative ways to connect.
Give me some examples.
Think about using technology. Text messages with tips on supporting reading at home.
Online forums where parents can connect.
Virtual workshops on child development.
Meeting parents where they are.
Exactly.
Using those tools and platforms that are already part of their lives.
And let's not forget about community partnerships.
Oh, yeah. Libraries, community centers.
Even local businesses can play a role.
Okay, how so?
Think about free reading programs, math game nights, even community gardens where kids are learning about science and math in a hands-on way.
Turning those communities into learning ecosystems
Exactly.
where education is happening everywhere.
Right.
But even with all these strategies, there are still going to be kids who struggle.
Of course, not every child learns at the same pace.
So what happens then?
That's where early intervention and individualized support come in.
Identify those kids who need extra help.
And give them that targeted support to catch up.
Recognizing that not every child learns the same way,
Exactly.
but that requires resources, right?
It does.
Extra staff, specialized training, and those things cost money.
You're absolutely right. And that's where the report highlights the need for increased investment in education.
If we're serious about every child succeeding, we have to put our money where our mouth is.
Exactly. And those investments need to be strategic,
Targeted,
reaching the schools and communities that need them most.
making sure those resources are actually making a difference.
It's about impact, not just spending.
Okay, we've covered a lot of strategies for strengthening those FLN programs.
Mm.
From your perspective, what are the key takeaways? What makes these programs work?
For me, it boils down to three things: high expectations,
Okay,
individualized support, and a collaborative approach.
love that.
Mm-hmm.
High expectations for every child, believing they can succeed,
Yeah.
individualized support, recognizing that they all learn differently,
Mm-hmm.
and working together, teachers, parents, communities, everyone,
Exactly.
to create that learning environment that works for every child.
That's the recipe for success.
But it's a tall order, right?
It is. There are challenges, no doubt.
Systemic issues, resource constraints.
But the ASR report gives us hope. It shows us that progress is possible.
That change is happening.
And that when we work together, we can create a brighter future for all these kids.
That's a powerful message. Okay, we've explored strategies for those FLN programs, but now I want to shift gears and talk about that digital divide.
Okay.
We talked about high smartphone ownership, which is great, but the report also highlights those challenges in digital literacy.
Right, especially that gender gap.
Exactly. So how do we bridge that divide? What can we learn from programs like PMGD Aisha?
Great questions. It's about moving from awareness to action.
And I'm sure our listeners wondering how we make sure everyone has those opportunities.
Right. And we need to remember the digital divide is complex.
It's not just about having a smartphone in your hand.
Exactly. It's about infrastructure, skills, literacy, even confidence.
It's like saying, okay, we've built the bridge, but now we need to make sure people know how to cross it, feel safe crossing it, and know where they're going.
Perfect analogy. So when we're talking about bridging this divide, we got to address all those layers.
Not just handing out devices,
Right.
but creating that whole ecosystem.
Where everyone can learn and thrive in this digital world.
So where do we start? What are some concrete strategies?
The report highlighted this expanding access to affordable internet, especially in rural areas.
Yeah, that's crucial, like extending those information superhighways to every village.
It might mean government initiatives, private partnerships, even community efforts,
Use mobile networks,
set up public Wi-Fi hotspots.
even satellite technology for those really remote areas.
It's about being flexible, finding what works.
But even with internet access, we still need to make sure people know how to use it.
Absolutely. Digital skills development is key.
And programs like PMGD Aisha are a good start.
They are,
But we need to make sure those programs are accessible to everyone.
regardless of their age, gender, location,
Offer training in multiple languages
at flexible time.
in different formats.
Right.
So it's truly inclusive.
And those programs should go beyond just the basics, right?
Oh, yeah. What else should they include?
Teach people how to evaluate information online,
Okay.
how to protect their privacy,
Important.
how to use those tools for communication, collaboration, even starting a business.
Empowering people to be creators, not just consumers.
Exactly. But even with access and skills, there's still that confidence piece.
Oh, right. You can have the best tools, but if you're too scared to use them,
You're not going anywhere.
so how do we build that digital confidence?
Supportive learning environments are key.
Places where people feel safe to experiment, ask questions, make mistakes.
Exactly.
Mistakes are part of learning.
Right. And those environments can take different shapes.
Like what?
Community centers with tech workshops, peer mentoring, even online forums where people can help each other.
Creating that sense of community,
Where
where
you
you
get
feel supported.
And those spaces can be especially important for women and girls.
Right. They often face extra barriers.
So how do we address that gender gap specifically?
Yeah, what are some strategies?
First, we got to challenge those stereotypes that link technology with masculinity.
Oh, yeah. Show girls that they can be tech creators too,
Exactly.
not just users.
Showcase female role models in STEM, create girls-only coding clubs, even design curricula that appeal more to girls' interests.
Making sure tech education is inclusive for everyone.
And of course, making sure girls have equal access to devices, internet, training.
Right, those practical things matter too.
It's about leveling the playing field.
And those early investments in girls' digital literacy can have such a huge impact.
Absolutely.
Education, economic opportunities, even social change.
It ripples outwards.
Okay, so access, skills, confidence, and making sure digital literacy is woven into everything else.
Yeah.
What other strategies did the report suggest?
Integrate digital literacy into the curriculum starting early.
Oh, yeah. Not just separate computer classes.
Make it part of every subject.
Show kids how to use those skills in the real world.
Exactly. Use technology to create interactive lessons, encourage research and collaboration.
Even teach them to code or design websites.
Right. Making technology a tool for learning, not just an extra thing.
Preparing them for those jobs of the future.
Many of which don't even exist yet.
Exactly. It's about those 21st century skills.
Critical thinking, problem solving, all of that.
And that brings us back to teacher support.
Yeah, they need training, too.
They can't teach what they don't know.
Exactly. And that training needs to be ongoing, personalized.
We meet teachers where they are.
And when we invest in our teachers' digital literacy, we're investing in our children's.
It's all connected.
It really is.
Okay, lots of strategies for bridging that digital divide. From your perspective, what are the key takeaways?
It's about access, skills, confidence, and integration. And it all has to be built on a foundation of equity and inclusion.
Making sure everyone benefits.
Exactly.
Okay, let's shift gears again. Back to those school visits that Aser did. We talked about infrastructure and resources, but the report also gives us a glimpse into what's actually happening in those classrooms.
Right, those teacher-student interactions.
What are the teaching methods? What are the challenges? What are those bright spots that make you excited about education in India?
I love that question. Let's peek into those classrooms and see what's working.
Because I'm sure our listener is curious. What did they actually observe?
Well, one thing was the variety of teaching methods.
Oh, so not every classroom looked the same.
Not at all. Some teachers were doing that traditional lecture style. Others were using more interactive techniques.
So it's not one size fits all.
Exactly. Effective teaching is about finding what works for you and your students. But some approaches did seem to stand out.
Okay, give me an example.
Storytelling. It was powerful.
Oh, yeah. Whether it's teaching math or history.
Right. When teachers used stories, kids were more engaged, remembered more.
We're hardwired for stories. It just makes sense.
And they don't have to be complicated.
Just a quick anecdote can bring a lesson to life.
Exactly. Making those connections between the curriculum and the kids' lives.
What about those foundational literacy and numeracy skills? How were teachers approaching those?
More active and engaging approaches were definitely gaining traction.
So using games, puzzles, songs, even rhymes.
Yeah, making it fun.
Turning those classrooms into playful learning spaces.
Exactly. And it's not just for little kids. Those active learning approaches can work for older students, too.
Okay, how so?
Role-playing to teach history, building models for science,
Hands-on learning.
using technology for interactive experiences.
So learning doesn't have to be passive.
It can be active, engaging, even fun.
And it's great for those 21st century skills.
Problem solving, collaboration, all of that.
But let's be real, not every classroom was a perfect picture.
Definitely not. Overcrowding was a big challenge.
Ah, yeah. 40, 50 kids in one room.
It's hard for teachers to give everyone individual attention.
And hard to do those active learning activities.
It's like trying to have a dance party in a crowded elevator.
Not much room to move.
Exactly. And then there were the resource constraints.
Which we've talked about.
A lot of schools, especially in rural areas, just didn't have basic resources.
Textbooks.
Teaching materials, even desks and chairs.
It's like trying to build a house without enough bricks.
You need the materials to make it work.
And those constraints affect teachers too.
Absolutely. It impacts their morale, their ability to be creative.
So supporting teachers is crucial.
It is.
Giving them the tools and resources they need.
And that's where community involvement comes in.
Oh yeah. Parents, local organizations.
Even businesses can help.
Donating books, volunteering, advocating for more funding.
It takes a village.
Exactly. We all have a role to play.
And that community support can make a world of difference.
It sends a message to those kids that we care,
We believe in them.
that we're all in this together.
It's powerful stuff.
Okay, we've talked about the challenges, but what about the opportunities? What did Acer see that gave you hope?
One thing that really stood out was the teachers.
Okay.
Their passion, their creativity.
Even in those tough situations.
They were finding ways to engage their students, make learning fun, spark those aha moments.
They were making it work.
Exactly.
What were some of the things they were doing?
They were using everyday materials to create learning games, adapting the curriculum to make it relevant, using technology in creative ways.
Resourcefulness at its finest.
It was inspiring.
And these teachers weren't working in isolation.
Right, collaboration was key.
Another encouraging trend from the report.
Teachers were working together, sharing ideas, supporting each other.
Creating that sense of community.
Exactly.
A culture of continuous improvement.
And that benefits everyone, teachers and students.
So it's not just about individual teachers.
It's about the whole system.
And that collaborative spirit extended beyond the classroom too, right?
Absolutely. Parental involvement was impressive in a lot of schools.
Parents were volunteering, coming to events, even working with teachers to develop the curriculum.
It was a true partnership.
Recognizing that we're all in this together.
Exactly.
Okay, lots of observations from those school visits. What are your biggest takeaways?
For me, it's about creating those positive, supportive learning environments.
Yeah, that came up a lot.
It's not just about resources or fancy technology.
It's about how those kids feel.
Do they feel safe, respected, valued?
That's where learning can truly thrive.
Exactly. And teachers can create that even in challenging circumstances.
It's about building relationships, showing you care, creating that sense of belonging.
Absolutely.
And the other takeaway for me, the power of those aha moments.
Oh, yeah, those are magical.
When a child suddenly gets it, when their eyes light up, when they discover something they love.
Those are the moments that make it all worthwhile.
And they don't always happen in a planned lesson.
Right. They can be spontaneous.
A conversation.
Hands-on activity.
Even during playtime.
It's about being present, being observant.
Catching those teachable moments.
And those moments are more likely when teachers feel supported. Which brings us back to collaboration.
That's a recurring theme.
When teachers feel like they're part of a team, they can be more creative, more effective.
It's a win-win for everyone.
So the ASR report shows us, even with challenges, there are incredible teachers out there.
Making a difference.
Inspiring those aha moments.
Breeding a brighter future.
And that's worth celebrating.
Okay, let's shift gears one last time. Talk about assessment.
Alrighty.
We've talked about foundational skills, but the report also talks about a more holistic approach to assessment.
Right. It's not just about test scores.
It's about the whole child.
Their cognitive skills, their social emotional skills, their creativity.
So how do we measure those things?
That's the challenge, right? Moving beyond those traditional tests.
Because I'm sure our listeners thinking, okay, holistic assessment sounds nice, but what does it actually look like?
Well, one shift is moving away from those multiple choice tests that only measure a narrow slice of what kids know.
Okay, so what do we use instead?
Authentic assessments.
What are those?
Assessments that reflect the real world, where kids can show their learning in different ways.
Okay, give me an example.
Project-based learning.
Oh, yeah, I've heard of that.
Instead of just memorizing facts, kids get a real-world problem to solve.
Like what?
Like, hey, you've learned about the water cycle. Now design a system to collect rainwater in your community.
Okay, cool.
They're applying their knowledge, thinking critically, working together, communicating their findings.
And they're not just spitting back information from a textbook. They're creating something new.
And project-based learning is flexible.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Kids can show what they've learned in different ways. A presentation, a report, a model, even a song or a piece of art.
Multiple ways to be intelligent, multiple ways to express yourself.
Right. Another example is portfolio assessment.
Okay, what's that?
Instead of just one test score, teachers collect different pieces of student work over time. Writing samples, art projects, science experiments.
Like a scrapbook of learning, showing how they've grown.
And portfolios can get students involved in their own assessment.
Oh, interesting.
How so? They can help choose what goes in, reflect on their strengths and weaknesses, set goals.
Empowering them to take ownership.
Exactly. But what about those harder to measure skills? Creativity, critical thinking.
Yeah, how do you put a number on that?
One approach is rubrics.
Okay, I've heard of those. But remind me how they work.
They outline specific criteria for those skills. So for creativity, it might be originality, fluency, flexibility.
So it's not just a gut feeling, it's more concrete.
Exactly. And rubrics are good for feedback, not just grading.
helping students understand what they're doing well and where they can improve.
Right. Another approach is observation.
Just watching how kids are doing,
Exactly. During discussions, group projects, even playtime.
looking for those skills in action.
And that can be really valuable, not just for assessing kids, but for helping teachers figure out how to teach better.
Assessment is a tool for improvement,
Exact.
but changing how we assess learning, that's a big shift.
It is. It takes a change in mindset, willingness to try new things.
Challenge the status quo.
But the Aser report shows us it's happening.
Teachers are embracing these new approaches
Finding creative ways to measure what matters,
and using assessment to support every child.
which is ultimately the goal.
Okay, one last theme to explore: equity and inclusion.
All right.
We've talked about those disparities in
Yeah.
resources, digital literacy, learning outcomes.
Yeah.
But the report also talks about creating learning environments that are truly inclusive.
Where every child feels valued, respected, empowered.
Right, recognizing that diversity is a strength.
Exactly.
So how do we create those inclusive environments? What are the strategies?
Great question. And it's important to remember inclusion is a journey, not a destination.
It's ongoing.
We're always reflecting, challenging ourselves, finding ways to make sure every child feels seen and heard.
It's like that garden analogy.
Yeah, you're constantly tending to it, making sure every plant has what it needs.
So where do we start?
First, create a classroom culture that celebrates diversity.
Okay, how do we do that?
Value those different cultures, languages, experiences.
Make sure the curriculum reflects that.
The books, the materials, the teaching methods, it all matters.
Create a space where every child's story matters.
Exactly. And create a sense of belonging.
Okay, how do we do that?
Greet students by name, let them share their interests, make eye contact, smile.
Those little things can make a big difference.
They really can.
Sending that message that you're welcome here.
You matter.
You're part of this community.
And another key strategy, differentiate instruction.
Ah, yes. Recognizing that kids learn differently.
Different paces, different styles.
Moving away from that one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. Provide different levels of support, use different teaching methods.
Let kids choose how they show what they've learned.
Make it flexible, responsive.
But differentiation takes time, effort, resources.
It does.
Yeah.
And that's where those systemic challenges can make it tough.
Yeah, overcrowded classrooms, lack of resources.
Those things get in the way.
So it's not just about individual teachers.
It's about the whole system.
Changing policies, funding, teacher training.
It's a collective effort.
Inclusion is everyone's responsibility.
And when we get it right, it benefits everyone.
It's about creating a more just and equitable society.
Exactly.
Okay, lots of strategies for inclusive learning. What are your biggest takeaways?
The power of relationships.
Oh, yeah, we talked about that with teachers.
It's crucial for creating those inclusive environments.
Kids need to know you care.
And when teachers have those strong relationships with their students, they're more motivated, more engaged.
It's good for everyone.
And the other thing that stood out to me, the Aser report shows us it's possible.
Even with the challenges.
There are teachers all over India who are building those inclusive environments.
Creating that sense of belonging.
And that's something to celebrate.
All right, we've covered so much ground in this deep dive.
We have.
Enrollment, learning levels, the digital divide, teaching, assessment, equity, and inclusion. But before we wrap up, I want to go back to that big question you posed earlier.
About imagining a world where every child in India can reach their full potential.
Exactly. After diving into this report, what's your takeaway? What gives you hope?
The report can feel overwhelming at times with all the challenges it highlights.
Yeah, that's a lot to process.
But it also shows us progress is possible.
Change is happening.
There are people all over India working so hard to make things better for these kids.
It's a long journey,
It is.
but we're moving forward.
And that's where the hope lies, for me, in those collective efforts. Teachers, parents, communities,
Policymakers, even the students themselves,
all working together.
to create an education system that truly works for everyone.
Education is a right, but it's also a responsibility.
We all have a role to play.
And the Aser report gives us the tools and the inspiration to do that.
It's call to action.
All right, we've come to the end of our deep dive into the Aser 2024 report. Thanks for joining us on this journey.
It's been a pleasure. I hope you found it insightful, maybe even a little inspiring.
I hope so too.
And for our listener, check out the full report on the Aser website. There's so much more to explore there.
Don't just read it, talk about it. Share it with others, start conversations.
Let's turn those data points into real-world change.
Let's create a brighter future for every child in India.
Keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep. It's like they're little architects, putting those skills to work.
Exactly. And it's not just about the final product. It's
Right.
about the process.
The thinking, the collaborating.
Exactly. Another example, portfolio assessment.
Okay, remind me how that works.
Instead of just one test, teachers collect different pieces of student work over time,
Oh,
writing samples, art projects, experiments.
it's like a snapshot of their learning journey.
Exactly. And portfolios can be really engaging for students.
Okay, how so?
They get to help choose what goes in, reflect on their progress, set goals.
It's not just something that's done to them.
Right, they're part of the process.
But what about those harder to measure skills, like creativity or critical thinking?
Yeah, those are tricky.
How do you even begin to assess those?
Well, one way is using rubrics.
Okay, break that down for me.
They outline specific criteria for those skills.
So it's not just subjective.
Right, it's more concrete. Like for creativity, you might have criteria for originality, fluency, flexibility.
Taking something that feels fuzzy and making it more measurable.
Exactly. And rubrics are good for giving feedback too, not just grades.
Helping students understand how to improve.
Right. Another approach, observation.
So watching the kids.
Yeah, during discussions, group projects, even playtime.
Looking for those skills in action.
And that can give teachers valuable insights, not just about individual students, but about their own teaching.
So assessment can be a tool for improvement, not just evaluation.
Exactly.
But changing the way we assess learning, that's a big shift.
It is. It takes time, effort, a willingness to try new things.
Challenge those old ways of thinking.
But the ASR report shows us it's happening.
Teachers are finding creative ways to measure what truly matters.
And that's exciting to see.
Okay, one last big theme to explore: equity and inclusion.
All right.
We talked about disparities in resources, digital skills, even learning outcomes.
Yeah.
But the report also talks about creating learning environments that are truly inclusive.
Where every child feels valued, respected, empowered.
So it's not just about equal access.
It's about creating a sense of belonging.
Making sure every child has a chance to thrive.
Exactly.
So how do we do that? What are the strategies?
It's important to remember inclusion is a journey.
Not a destination.
We're always learning, growing, finding ways to make our classrooms more inclusive.
It's like tending a garden.
Yeah, you're constantly nurturing it, making sure every plant has what it needs to flourish.
Okay, so where do we start?
One important step, create a classroom culture that celebrates diversity.
What does that look like?
Value those different cultures, languages, experiences that kids bring.
Make sure the curriculum reflects that diversity.
Use books and materials that represent different perspectives.
Make sure the teaching methods are sensitive to those different needs.
Create a space where every child feels like their story matters.
Yeah, where their voice is heard.
Exactly. And creating a sense of belonging is crucial.
Okay, how do we do that?
Simple things. Greet students by name, let them share their interests, make eye contact, smile.
Those little things can go a long way.
They really can. It's about sending that message that you're welcome here, you're part of this.
That you matter.
Right. Another key strategy, differentiate instruction.
We talked about that with the assessment.
It applies here too, recognizing that kids learn differently.
So move away from that one-size-fits-all approach.
Exactly. Provide different levels of support, use different teaching methods, give kids choices.
Make it flexible, make it responsive.
But differentiation can be tough, especially with those systemic challenges.
Yeah, overcrowding, lack of resources, those things make it harder.
So we need to address those systemic issues too.
Policy changes, funding, teacher training.
It takes a village.
Inclusion is everyone's responsibility.
And when we create those inclusive environments, it benefits everyone.
It creates a more just and equitable society.
Exactly.
So, after exploring all these strategies, what are your biggest takeaways?
The power of relationship.
It keeps coming back to that, doesn't it?
It really does. Those connections between teachers and students, they're at the heart of inclusive education.
When kids feel seen and heard, that's when the magic happens.
Exactly. And the Aser report reminds us that it's possible.
Even with the challenges.
They're teachers doing amazing things, creating those inclusive spaces.
And that gives me hope.
Me too.
Okay, so we've covered a lot in this deep dive.
We have enrollment, learning levels, digital literacy, teaching practices, assessment, equity and inclusion.
We've really gone deep. But before we wrap up, I want to circle back to that big question.
About imagining a world where every child in India can reach their full potential.
Exactly. After spending all this time with the Aser report, what's your final takeaway?
It can feel overwhelming, all the challenges, the disparities.
Yeah, it's a lot to take in.
But the report also shows us that progress is happening.
That people are working hard to make things better.
And that gives me hope.
Me too.
For me, that's the biggest takeaway. We're not there yet, but we're moving in the right direction.
It's a journey, not a sprint.
Exactly. And it's a journey we're all on together.
Teachers, parents, communities, policymakers,
Everyone has a role to play.
and the ACELR report gives us the roadmap. Okay, that's a perfect note to end on.
It is.
I hope our listeners feeling inspired, maybe even a little fired up to make a difference.
Me too. Let's turn this knowledge into action.
Absolutely. So, to everyone listening, thank you for joining us on this deep dive into the Acer 2024 report.
It's been a pleasure.
We encourage you to check out the full report on the Acer website, dive into the data, explore those stories.
And most importantly, don't just read it. Talk about it. Share it with others. Start conversations.
Let's make education a priority.
Let's work together to create a brighter future for every child in India.
Until next time, keep learning, keep questioning, and keep diving deep.